Okay, welcome back. I did a lot of stuff in the past day, I guess. So let's walk through some of it. The first thing that I actually think is quite important, maybe the most important from all the prep that I did today, is this little document about implementations. Um, some people have told me maybe like PFers are not the best at debating implementations of the resolution. I kind of disagree. I mean, I think that maybe if you're not the best at debating implementations of the resolution, it's because you don't have a lot of practice or you haven't really been told how. So here's me attempting to tell you how. What the heck am I talking about, first of all? Obviously, you know what topicality is, hopefully. So topicality, right, is like what is the definition of the topic? What is the outer bound of what the words in the topic mean? So, for example, a nuclear sharing agreement does not mean sharing nuclear energy. That's just not what a nuclear sharing agreement is. That's not topical. Even though I include it down here as like a version of the topic that people will read, it is not topical because if you read a definition of nuclear sharing agreement, it will not say that it includes nuclear energy sharing on a commercial basis. Maybe nuclear energy sharing to facilitate nuclear weapons. It's furthermore not topical because of the clause create an independent deterrent capability. There isn't really a reason why sharing nuclear energy would create an independent deterrent. But even if you did think it was topical, even if you think technically the words in this resolution open the possibility for that being a form of the resolution, an implementation of the resolution, you then have a further burden of proving that it is a likely or it is the most likely form of the resolution. See, in PF, which is different from policy in LD, we don't get to sort of the affirmative does not get to pick which form of the resolution, which nonetheless is topical, they want to defend. Instead, both the pro and the con have equal responsibility, equal ground, equal burden to prove why the most likely interpretation is one in which their arguments actually operate under. That is to say, both the pro and the con have equal ground to argue and debate about what the resolution actually is likely to look like. We're debating about if this did happen, what would it look like? You still have fiat, obviously, to say that it does happen, but you need to debate about the most likely way that it would happen. So here are a few possible implementations that I was brainstorming, and here's what I think that debate would actually look like. And I'll explain why I think it's actually quite influential on how the topic goes, because I think there's a lot of ambiguity under every possible interpretation of the topic. So the first implementation is maybe the most obvious one, which is just that France does the NATO thing, right? As much as they can, because there will still be some differences because France is France and the US is the US. France has strategic nuclear weapons, the US has tactical ones, whatever. As close as possible, it will just do NATO nuclear sharing with EU countries. And so that would look like, it bases its warheads a few, like maybe 20 in a few different countries that volunteer. It retains a veto over them, but the host countries also have a veto, and that's kind of that, right? You can read up more about NATO to determine more of the details. Here's why. Here's an example of what you might say if someone challenges this interpretation, or even on the front end, to sort of warrant out why this is the most likely interpretation. So first, you can say historically, there are good reasons why France will follow historical precedent. I wrote some incentives here, like modeling agreements based on the existing standards can insulate you from backlash because you can just point to, well, they did it, so I'm just doing what they did. Whereas you might get extra backlash if you sort of break from historical precedent and do your own new thing. And then there's a few theory arguments here. So this stuff is more like topicality stuff, but or theoretical stuff, but I think it's interesting. It's a dimension of the implementation debate you can also consider, which is like maybe this is actually what the resolution intends. There's some interesting sort of meta theoretical stuff here about why framers' intent matters linguistically. I think this is cool, but I'm a bit of a nerd about it. Um, then on predictability, this is also like a theoretical idea that maybe this is more predictable. This is a better sort of stasis point for the topic. The rest of them though, don't really have any theory arguments because you don't usually use theory arguments in implementation. Most of them will just rely on this kind of logic, right? Like this is the most likely for France and the EU to agree upon for these reasons because of these incentives that they have. And this like historical precedent can prove that. Um, the second possible implementation is that they only share during wartime. So, what does this mean? I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this, but this is actually quite important. It does not mean that France just extends its nuclear deterrent. That's not the same thing, right? That can be done without a nuclear sharing agreement. In fact, maybe it could be done in the status quo trend without a nuclear sharing agreement. Instead, what it means is that France helps other volunteers in the EU, like Germany, to re-engineer or reconfigure some of their planes so that one day in the future, maybe France will give them a warhead that those planes can launch with fighter pilots from those countries. So, for example, Germany can take some of its like Tornado fighter pilots, fighter bombers, and then uh, go with French engineers and like tweak them so that they can actually launch French warheads, and then German pilots one day maybe can use those planes to launch warheads. The maybe is like only if France decides to give them, or only during war, or something like that. So the reconfiguring of the planes, technically, this is all you actually need for it to count as a nuclear sharing agreement. Even though you're not actually sharing nuclear weapons, you're like creating an agreement so that during war you could share nuclear weapons, which is what the minimum threshold definitionally for a nuclear sharing agreement would be. Um, and France still retains like sole authority over the launch, but the EU countries can volunteer to help France deliver its warheads when France is in a time of war. This is, I think, a much more likely interpretation than the NATO sharing stuff because of French politics. There's a million cards that I found that say basically like France is not going to do the normal NATO stuff. That's like going too far for France. But they have been sort of a little bit more open to limited cooperation. They did like some like nuclear missions with Italy. Even those, they were sort of wary of not allowing Italy to take too much of a necessary role in the nuclear drills. But maybe that means that it's like more open to things on that level of the sliding scale of nuclear cooperation. If you're going to fiat something, it's more likely to be over there, like cooperative drills and like reconfiguring planes instead of on the other end of like we're going to put our nuclear weapons on your soil or give you any kind of authority over them. The third type of implementation that I was considering is honestly, in my opinion, probably even more likely and quite diluted. This is not something that I've heard anyone talk about, which is that I think it's most likely that France and the EU, they're going to come together, normal means, whatever, they're going to debate it out, and then everyone is going to disagree. And this sort of always happens in the EU. Like everyone is going to have their own interests. They have to agree unanimously on what the nuclear sharing agreement looks like. And so they're just going to like add conditions. Like every country is just going to slap a condition on and be like, yeah, because of fiat, whatever, we're okay with this, but only if this is a condition for the sharing to be initiated or activated. So, some T stuff here. You can create an agreement. You can establish an agreement without activating that agreement, right? Like, for example, NATO's Article 5, right? The agreement is that I defend you if you get attacked. You are not being attacked, so I'm not going to defend you right now. That's how it works. Um, and so you can imagine that you could sub in a whole bunch of other things for that if you get attacked clause in the agreement. So agreements can be established as conditional without being activated during normal times. And so that's what I think is going to happen. Like you're just going to have the EU slap on like 100 different conditions on the agreement. I mean, maybe that's an exaggeration, but you get conditions like this, like everyone has to agree, the host has to do a referendum with majority support in their country, France has to agree every time, France will retain sole sovereign like authority over its arsenal, blah, 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 blah. And what you get is actually nothing. You get an agreement that is purely symbolic and nothing actually happens at all. You don't move any nuclear weapons anywhere. You don't build any new nuclear weapons. You don't do anything. And you just have this hypothetical agreement that one day could be established, could be activated, is established, could be activated, but really in practice just won't be. And so you actually, I think this is a really interesting version of the resolution or implementation of the resolution rather, because it I think is more likely than anything else. And it still is a big deal. Like if this actually happened, this would still be a big deal. It's just not in the way that people are talking about it. Like it's purely symbolic, actually purely symbolic. Um, and I think this is important to think about because like when I'm reading over people's cases and stuff, or like, hearing about what people are running on this topic, a lot of assumptions are being made about the implementation. Lots of assumptions are just like a contention will be written that's just like, oh yeah, if we move nuclear weapons to Greece, then then bad things will happen. And it's like, who told you that this resolution is about Greece, first of all? Like, why is Greece, of all of the EU countries, going to get nuclear weapons? And why are we assuming that they're going to be moved there? Like, you just are assuming so much in that that's what a nuclear sharing agreement entails, but there's no evidence that says that that is a necessary condition for something to be called a nuclear sharing agreement, and there is evidence that says that it's not a necessary condition. So you still are missing a piece there. And it's possible, and it actually is probable, that in most rounds, both teams will just agree on this, right? This assumption will not be challenged because it is strategically important for both teams to get more ground by sort of closing their eyes and being like, yeah, we're going to agree that even though it's not true, the most extreme interpretations of the topic or implementations of the topic are what we're going to debate because that gives us more nuclear war scenarios. But I think some teams are going to wise up and then they're going to question those assumptions, and then suddenly you're not going to have a case. So, what do you do then? So, we should get better at defending our assumptions, defending our implementations. And I think that, to be clear, I think that there are ways to work back up to like a good solid ground on both sides from a very diluted agreement. One, the symbolic stuff is actually huge. Um, and like there is so much symbolic ground on both sides. That's what the bread and butter of this resolution is actually about. But second, if you want more of a tangible thing, I think there is good reason to say that like other things will be done. For example, I think we heard from Bryce that like clearly they wanted us to debate about more French proliferation. I think the reason that that's baked into the resolution is because one, France only has strategic nuclear weapons. No country in the history of the world has ever engaged in a nuclear sharing agreement with strategic nuclear weapons. So it's possible that like France as a condition for entering the nuclear sharing agreement, or as a likely implementation, they like add new tactical nuclear weapons to their arsenal. And also, the word create in the resolution seems to imply creating something new, which maybe is not just the agreement being created because that was established, but also like the deterrent capability, right? Like T capability is also in there. So we have create an independent capability. That seems like it means prolif, right? Like how do you create a new capability by giving one thing to another person? You don't. You have to like create the capability and give it to that person for there to be an independent deterrent capability that is created. I don't know. Maybe this is a stretch, but I think that these are the kinds of conversations we have to be having about how the ground is distributed on this topic, and what the topic actually looks like. So at the very bottom for extra implementations, I have a bunch of squirrely ones. Maybe this is not as squirrely, but I think almost all of the other ones are. These are ones that I've either thought of or have heard or have read in literature, but they're not likely to happen. But people will read them. You should think about how to respond. If you are going to read them, you should think hard about how to defend them as most likely implementations. Okay, that's implementation stuff. It is important. It frames the entire debate, and it could be very easy terminal defense against a lot of scenarios that haven't actually defended their assumptions. I cut some random uniqueness stuff that these two cards say like, war is coming, maybe. This card says Slovenia is maybe considering dipping out of NATO after the new spending requirements. They're at least voting on it. This one says that Poland and France already signed a treaty that supposedly extends French nuclear deterrence over Central Europe. I think that's a misinterpretation by the author. But it at least obliges that they like defend each other, which, yeah, okay, redundant with the EU collective defense, redundant with Article 5, but symbolically linking Poland and France. See, like all of this stuff is symbols. Why would they do this if it's only symbolic? It's because the symbols matter. So we have to really dive into that symbol debate, in my opinion. Okay, it's all symbols all the way down. EU divisions. I cut one card that says the EU is very divided over nuclear matters. I'll cut more on this later. I think there's great content on the con about the EU potentially sort of like splintering as a result of this. Um, there's good stuff on US decoupling. So it turns out that card I was saying doesn't exist. Maybe it kind of does. This is the real card that people are reading. It says that there are fears that talking too much about a European replacement, let alone trying to construct one, would only encourage Mr. Trump to withdraw his pledge. And then at the bottom of this card, it says, does it send the wrong signal and have the unintended consequence of America leaving? It's the decoupling argument that we fear so much. So this is the card that people are actually reading. It's the closest thing to saying that nuclear sharing equals US withdrawal. It doesn't really say that, but um, I think that it has enough to get you there potentially. That said, let's be honest, this isn't as strong as people are making it out to be. One, there's a reason that people are always talking about this as a supplement. Like the rhetoric around potential French nuclear sharing is very careful. It is very careful. Everyone who's talking about it is like very careful not to call it a replacement or to imply that it at all could be a replacement. So for example, like when they actually come to the agreement, one of the like implementation things that you can do is you could say it is most likely because all of these fears exist, that one of the conditions for the agreement to be activated is that the US nuclear umbrella is still there and that the US hasn't pulled back or I don't know, something like that. So that the US knows that this is not a replacement. This is a stretch, but these kinds of creative things are ways that you can get around these links. And then there's another card that sort of seems to historically back this that said that, historically the reason why purely European nuclear temptations, like an independent nuclear deterrent, have been rejected is because they don't want decoupling. They don't want the US to leave, basically. And so that sort of gives more weight to these arguments because they have historically been the basis for why such an agreement has not succeeded. So at least we know that European countries are taking this argument seriously. This card is about the security of the nuclear weapons stationed at Incirlik Air Base in Turkey. Forgive me for my pronunciation. It says a lot of things on both sides. It has a lot of reasons why it is very difficult to steal and use nuclear weapons from nuclear bases. And it also has reasons why it is still very dangerous to keep them there. This is in with regards to Turkey, to NATO nuclear sharing, but I guess the same warranting could apply to French nuclear sharing. Honestly, I think this card might even be better for the pro in terms of defense because it has so many reasons. Like it really goes into the details for why it's not really possible to like steal and use nuclear weapons, no matter who you are. And it wouldn't really change anything even if you did. So there's good defense here. But it does conclude that like we should still take them out of Turkey because better safe than sorry. I was thinking about writing this into a pro scenario though, by saying like maybe if the EU establishes an independent nuclear deterrent through nuclear sharing, then the US will sort of like be like freed up politically to like remove its nukes from Turkey, which might be bad, might be good. This article says that it would be net good, but I don't actually think that's a very strategic scenario after I've attempted to think about it and prep it a bit. But I'm going to leave this here if people disagree with me. And then finally, I was brainstorming in sort of APTA style. Some of the comparatives on this topic that I think are incredibly important. And also, again, I am not really hearing people talk about. The comparative is like, what's going to happen instead, right? What is happening instead and what will happen instead, and what conditionally will happen instead. For example, like if we have more escalation of conflict, or if we have more threats from Russia that war might start soon, which we kind of know about in advance. Like think about Ukraine, right? Like I saw headlines from Biden that like Russia's gonna invade like a week before it happened. Like there is a degree of advanced warning that we get with our intel. I think it's unlikely that an invasion scenario is going to be like a huge surprise that blindsides us. But that means that other things are likely to happen to improve European deterrence against Russia without nuclear sharing. So we need to know about the comparison between what will happen with nuclear sharing and what will happen without nuclear sharing. So I wrote a bunch of questions here. that sort of give a lot of good comparatives to, in my opinion, the con. So first of all, why does it need to be the EU? This has been a question on my mind since I started reading the topic at the very beginning. So the comparative is like France could establish nuclear sharing agreements bilaterally with each of the countries, like Germany, France, Denmark, or not France, I should say, Poland. I don't know why France is there. Poland, Lithuania, and Denmark. There's plenty of net benefits. This seems to avoid a lot of the disadvantages while guaranteeing a lot of advantages. And there's some cool like fill ground here too about freedom. There's like a sort of consult counterplan function of this, which is like France and these countries are very smart. They have their own interests in mind. If they think this is a good idea, they will do it. They do not need the EU. So, if they do not do it, it means it is not a good idea for them, or something like that. Which is an interesting sort of double bind that you could put them in. And then maybe NATO could do something similar if the EU doesn't like expand US nuclear sharing or do France through NATO or something. Why does it need to be France? Maybe the UK could do it. Why does it need to be nuclear sharing? Maybe France will just more explicitly include the rest of Europe in its nuclear umbrella, which seems to be something that it's sort of doing right now in baby steps. And then why does it need to be nuclear? Conventional buildup maybe also solves. So these are all comparatives that we should think about on both the pro and the con. And without further ado, let's get into GeoGuessr. Okay. I sort of forgot about it last week. So I maybe to make up for it, I'll do two very quick this week. So this one is clearly Mexico. Um, Not that much to say. Oh, we have a pink taxi. Is this the Mexico City taxi? I mean, it looks, is this even a taxi? Maybe this is bait. I think that is a Mexico City taxi, but it might be bait. Let's just like make completely sure. Does that say 363? I don't know. I don't think it does. I know the area codes to some extent, so if I find one, that would be nice. But I'm not really seeing any. The license plates are nothing, I think. Um, what does this look like? We have some palms. Um, I mean, I might just click Mexico City and get baited by that car, which is clearly not a taxi. Yeah, it was, oh my gosh, it was Merida. Oh, I should have known that. Um, okay, well, that's okay. I got baited by the taxi. What is this? This is Ghana. Is this Northern Ghana? I guess it's very dry. Let's click Northern Ghana. I need to learn my Northern Ghana, but I would go like it's either like Wa or Tamale, somewhere around there. Come on, please. Okay, it was Wa side. I didn't commit. What is this? This looks like what? Is this Russia? No. Is this Lithuania? What am I looking at? Um, I don't really know. It could be like Lithuania or Latvia, Estonia. Let's go Lithuania. It was Latvia. Okay, fair enough. Baltic roulette. This is Peru. I've been learning a little bit of Peru recently, so um, let's see if I can see anything. Well, that doesn't say anything that helps me. Um, does this look north or south? I mean, obviously, first instinct here is south. Um, I hope that's correct. Technically, it could be north, but I think this is a little bit too southern looking to be north. Um, anything, anything else, anything at all? Doesn't look like it. Okay, I'm gonna go southern central Peru and hope for the best. If it's north, then sue me. Okay, it's north of Lima, but it's not north north, so I'm okay. This looks like what, Norway? I guess. Yeah. Cool mountains. Um, I am not very good at region guessing Norway, but we're gonna go over here by Trondheim. Okay, it was what? It was like Lofoten? That's crazy. I did not really get that vibe. Okay, we have an okay score. We're gonna do it again. This is proof that I'm not selectively recording the good ones. This looks to be Turkey. Western Turkey, I guess. The architecture is more Western. And where in Western Turkey? Don't think I will get much closer than that. Let's find a random valley. Um, and yeah, fairly close. Okay. Pretty good Turkey region guess, all things considered. This, I mean, first thought here was Ukraine. I guess it could be Russia. Um, I'm actually not great with the 50-50 between Ukraine and Russia, but this looks just very Ukrainian. So, and then where would it be in Ukraine? Maybe slightly more southern or central, like not like northern like last time. I would go like here. And it was all the way west. Okay, well, at least that's slightly more central, we can pretend. This is going to be, oh, is this the Antioquia pole paint? I think it is. This is going to be Colombia, specifically the Antioquia department. So that's like over here by Medellin, right? Yeah, so yeah, good guess. Oh, I didn't mean to load that. Okay, and then f second to last round, we have um what? Is this is this Tierra del Fuego or am I tripping? Um, there's a very real possibility I'm tripping, but who cares? I'm gonna go. It looks like Tierra del Fuego. It could be Chile. It could be Chile. It could be Chile. But let's go Tierra del Fuego. It was Chile. Okay, that's fine. Um, Philippines. Philippines. Not much to say about the Philippines. It's very mountainous, but so is much of the Philippines. Interesting lamps, but I don't think I know what that means. In terms of foliage, this is giving more Luzon than like Mindanao, so I'm gonna go a bit more north. Maybe up here in one of these places. And it was central. Okay, it's always central. Another decent score. But yeah, respectable. Hopefully you enjoyed that and more prep coming tomorrow. Also, I should announce before I end, in approximately 11 hours, I'm interviewing with Spencer Orlowski, one of the authors that I actually cited on this topic earlier. Um, so yeah, that's pretty cool. I think her name is Nuclear. I'm gonna pronounce it wrong, but it's this. No, it's not this one. Wait, is it this one? Um, no, it's like, oh, this is embarrassing. I should take this out. No, I'm not gonna take it out. Why would I do that? France nuclear arsenal. Uh, let's see. Here it is. This one. This woman. What is her name? Tell me your name. Emmanuel Maitre, Maitre, Maite. I don't know how to pronounce that, but that's okay. I will learn in the next 11 hours. But she wrote this banger of an article. Look at this. Um, sovereign capacity. Look, all of this stuff about historical, how France has grown closer to the UK. Um, the French nuclear doctrine, the potential for French nuclear sharing, the tailored capabilities, different perspectives. And it's part of a lot of research that she's done in the past. She's like written entire, like this is a PDF, this is just a preview. Um, entire articles, entire research papers about specifically the French nuclear posture, which is wonderful. So we are going to interview her about this topic specifically, ask her a lot of questions, and then post it on the channel. So look forward to that. This is one of like several interviews with experts that we're hoping to do. So I'm super pumped to like see what's actually true on the topic. We'll ask her about deterrence and escalation. We'll ask her about the implementation questions. We'll ask her about French politics. So stay tuned for that. So lots of exciting things coming. See you later.